I'm going to demonstrate Easy Complete Quilt using squares right now. I'm going to only do a 4 square sample. So I have used my pattern to cut 4 backs out of a lightweight denim. I've used my pattern to cut 4 center pieces, and I've used my pattern to cut 4 interfacing or lining pieces out of fusible quilt fleece. When I begin this process, I simply move the center pieces or the face pieces aside because I'm going to do all my work on the backs. Before joining the backs together, I want to choose only one corner of each piece of the interfacing lining or fleece. Those are all the same thing. And I want to stay stitch them a little less than 1/4 of an inch from their edge on one of the corner parts of the batting. I want to repeat this process on each of the pieces of fabric I've cut to make the back, just choosing one corner to stay stitched. So I'm just going to review what stay stitching is. It's stitching through a single layer of fabric. It's there for reinforcement. It's usually done with a stitch that's regular stitch length or slightly smaller. It's very difficult to remove those stitches, so you want to make sure they fall within your 1/4 of an inch. They're just a little closer to the cut edge of the fabric than 1/4 of an inch. Here you can see I'm using bright orange to indicate where I've stay stitched on each of the batting or lining pieces. And the side where the orange stay stitching appears is the fusible side, or the wrong side of the interfacing. I apologize for calling the batting lining, but I consider the batting and a lining interchangeable because sometimes I use just flannel in 2 layers, and that would make the internal fabric used in the product a lining, not batting. Here's the wrong side of my denim that I'm going to use for the back of each quilt square, and you can see by the orange stitching I stay stitched just along one area that's going to end up being the corner of each quilt square. To line the quilt squares, I take a single back and I have the orange stay stitching here. You can't see it because it's black on this side, and I'm going to put it right side up, and then I'm going to position a liner or a piece of batting on one edge, and I'm going to stitch through all layers, joining the batting to the backing along one long edge. If I back stitch anywhere, it's always here. And sometimes if my stitches are small, like some quilters use, like 2 or 1.8, I don't even bother back stitching at the other ends. But it is very important to back stitch or secure your threads when you're joining the batting to the backing at this edge. And so all I'm going to do is take this to the sewing machine and sew a row of stitches 1/4 of an inch from the edge along this long line, joining the 2 pieces together. So they're right sides together, and so you can see this is the wrong side and this is the other wrong side. When you sew the lining to the back along one edge, you see that the back is bigger than the lining, but you're going to continue to sew the long edges together by pulling the lining so it meets the raw edges of the back. This will create a channel sort of event happening here, and that's fine. That's what you want to do. So I'm going to go back to the sewing machine, sew 1/4 of an inch from the edge, joining the batting lining to the back along this long edge. After I've sewn the bottom and the top, I pull the batting over to the edges of the back, and I'm going to sew this long seam, and I'm going to sew this long seam after that. When I'm done, the piece will look like this, with the batting or fleece flat looking, but the back actually kind of bubbling above it. Once I've got all my squares joined to the lining or the batting, I go ahead and I trim just the batting to approximately 1/8 of an inch all around. That because the batting does not want to fold easily, so it's going to interfere with folding this fabric the way I want it to. So if you trim it to 1/8 of an inch, it'll actually support the piece instead of fighting it. All 4 of the pieces that I'm going to use have been trimmed, and now I'm going to bring them to the right side by turning them right side out. I do this by pulling the fabric through the stay stitched edge, and that way it's reinforced and there's a reduced chance that it'll distort and pull out of shape. I also want to comment, these are fleece. Had they been a fabric, I would not have trimmed them. Now I'm going to take this to the ironing board and press it. And notice how the fleece, if I kind of push it up into this area, it supports the rolled edge that I want. It doesn't fight it.